Okay, so let's put this all together. We've looked at the frame buffer. We've looked at some compositing in the color buffer using alpha. So where do all these things fit? We've now seen in this class, we've now seen enough in this class to be able to talk about the complete pipeline that's happening in our graphics card. So we give a command. We need to draw some triangles. So here's our buffer with our list of positions. And here's our buffer with our list of texture coordinates. This object to camera space transform, right? This is what we're getting with our look at. We have some perspective transform. We have some screen. Okay, we got all the stuff we need. So step one, we transform the vertices of the triangle into camera space. You guys are doing this in your lab right now. This is projection matrix times view matrix times model matrix times point. Right? This is step one. It runs in our vertex shader. We're going to try to move all these triangles into camera space. We apply the perspective transform. I guess step one didn't have the perspective transform. In this listing that I've got to organize, so we're going to call the perspective another step. You have it all stacked together into a stack of matrices in what you're doing. We're going to apply some clipping. This you haven't written any code about. You don't worry about. This is something the graphics card is doing for you. We're going to transform to screen coordinates. Again, you're not really doing much about this. OpenGL deals with this because you're rendering into a GL buffer, and that thing's getting built onto a web page. It's all in the back end someplace where the scaling is happening. It's nothing you had to write about. This triangle setup has to do with rasterization and figuring out which pixels to turn on. We haven't even talked about that in this class. The next thing is that the graphics card is going to figure out which samples, which pixels get turned on inside this triangle based on the vertex transforms that we did in our vertex shader. So now we have a list of samples, and each of these samples is going to run through the fragment shader, looking up the color. So for each sample, we're going to run the fragment shader. There's 1,000 samples here in our triangle. We're going to run this fragment shader 1,000 times. We're going to go get colors out of the texture. We're going to go figure out a color. After this finishes, we're going to do a depth test. Some fragments are going to fail. Some fragments are going to pass the depth test. And for the fragments that pass the depth test, we're going to update the color buffer. And this update of the color buffer is going to be using the over operator. So if you're mostly rendering opaque, meaning your alpha is 1, then you're writing in there when you pass. If you were using some kind of transparency, then you would have been doing some combination of the colors in order to get this. And then we repeat this for every triangle in the scene. And this is what's going on in your graphics card. So we've now gotten far enough in the class that you've seen sort of all of the steps. We've talked about the transforms, we've talked about perspective, talked about our camera, we've talked about the colors and the Z buffer and how all of these things flow through. So this is what we've gotten to up until today.